My son's going to be a history teacher. He loves history. I kind of like it. 1776, we declare independence from Britain July 4th, right? That's Independence Day, 4th of July. We have a parade every year. That was in July. By that December, we were in trouble as a fledgling nation. George Washington had the army up in Delaware, New Jersey area, Pennsylvania. They were cold. They weren't being fed. Half of them had no shoes. They had rags on their feet. They were leaving blood trails in the snow, right? It's part of our history that we talk about. And everybody's enlistment was coming up, and they were being beaten and beaten and beaten. And it looked bad for the home team. This was only a couple months after we declared independence. The Britons had hired German soldiers. They were called Hessians, and they were like mercenaries. It was like Blackwater. You know, they had a big Blackwater army. And these guys were on the other side of the Delaware River on the 25th of December, Christmas Day. Now, the Germans do Christmas big. And quite frankly, a lot of them were drunk. And they were taking them easy on guard shift, and they were having just Christmas. And America, you'll remember this, George Washington crossed the Delaware, right? He crossed with the ice floes. We have that painting, and he's in the ship. And they all go across on Christmas Day, and they attack, and we won. We defeated those Hessians, and that kind of started turning things around for us. Now, we look at that story, and we go, wow, it was really sad that our guys had to attack on Christmas. You know, they were cold, they were wet, they had no shoes, and instead of having a nice Christmas with family, they were having to go to war and attack. Well, it was sad that they were cold, and it was sad that many of them had no shoes on their feet, and it was sad that they were hungry. But what's not sad is that they had to attack on Christmas. You know why? None of those guys celebrated Christmas. We didn't celebrate Christmas in this country until the 1800s. No Americans were celebrating Christmas in the 1700s. You know, but hey, wait a minute, we're a Christian nation. Why weren't we celebrating Christmas? Do you know the Puritans outlawed Christmas? If they caught people celebrating so-called Christmas, they would fine them and they would punish them. It was outlawed in Boston too. You would get fined if they caught you singing Christmas carols. Jesus certainly didn't celebrate Christmas. His apostles didn't celebrate Christmas. The disciples did not celebrate Christmas. And guess what? The early church for a few hundred years did not celebrate any holiday called Christmas. We're not even supposed to celebrate Christmas. We're not supposed to celebrate the birth of Christ. We're not supposed to focus on that. It says we're supposed to celebrate, we're supposed to remember his death until he comes. When we do the Lord's Supper here, we read from 1 Corinthians, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death till he come." Before we get into why Christians started celebrating Christmas, because obviously many do now, let's look at why this whole date of Christmas is wrong in the first place. Because I guarantee you, I can show you from the Word that Jesus Christ was not born on December 25th. He wasn't born anywhere near December 25th. So, we can read in Luke 2:8. You can turn there, but you don't have to. You know this. You know this story. "And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night." Right, and that's when the angel of the Lord appears, right, and says, "Behold, there's a child born in Bethlehem. Go see him. Go check him out." Guess what? 2,000 years ago, the land of Israel was just like it is today, as far as weather patterns and things like that. And it's winter there in December. And in December, there's no grass out in the fields. Shepherds do not abide with their flocks in the middle of winter. In the middle of winter, they bring their flocks in, and they bring them before the middle of winter, and they put them in pens, penned-in pastures, and they feed them hay that they've been gathering all summer long. They're not out in the fields. They're out in the fields when there's hay growing up, or grass growing up there, but they weren't out there then. In Luke chapter 1, and we're not going to read a whole lot from it, but if you want to turn there, you can. Zacharias is performing his duties in the temple. And we read about that in Luke chapter 1. Around the time of Elizabeth's conception. Now in Luke chapter 1, it's telling the story of the birth of Jesus Christ. That's what they're getting to. And of course, the birth of John the Baptist. And Zacharias was John the Baptist's dad. Now, if you know your roots, if you know about Yah's feast, Yahweh's feast, God's feast, because they're not Jewish feasts, all right? They're God's feasts. You understand this a lot easier. But, matter of fact, Luke 1:5. I'll go there. You should maybe turn there. Luke 1:5. There was in the days of Herod, the king of Judea, a certain priest named Zacharias, that's John the Baptist's dad. Of course, John's not born yet. Of the course of Abiah. And his wife was of the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. So Elizabeth and Zacharias are the parents-to-be of John the Baptist. Now, why does it say he was of the course of Abiah? I mean, what does that even mean? Well, there were 24 courses. There were 24 squads, if you put it in military term. There were 24 groups of priests. And one of those 24 groups was called Abiah. And you can read about this, and on the back of your program, we've got the verses that you can go into your word. We're not making that up. Now, these 24 different groups of priests had specific times during the year when they were required to perform their duties. This is known. This is spelled out in the Word. You have to translate the Jewish Israelite months into current months, but we know when that was. Verse 8. And it came to pass that while he executed the priest office before God in the order of his course. Now, we're reading that for a reason. They're giving us a date here. I mean, that's why they're saying he was in Abiah and he was doing his duties at that time. So that puts him in the temple during a specific week of the year. According to the custom of the priest office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. Now, we know that this was happening in late June. The week that is in late June is when he was doing this. And so the story continues, and he's told that your wife is going to conceive and she's going to have a baby, and that goes on. And 9 months from late June is what? It's Passover. 9 months later, we hit Passover. And so 9 months later, John the Baptist is born. And we know that John the Baptist was born at Passover. But you don't have to take just that fact. There's another thing you can consider. Jews then, Jews today, because they have traditions, during Passover, they pour an extra cup of wine and they set it on the table. You know who that wine's for? Elijah. They're waiting for Elijah to come back. And so that wine is sitting there for Elijah. Why? Because they had a tradition. They believed that Elijah was coming back. Matter of fact, in Malachi is the book right before Matthew. Malachi chapter 4 verse 5, it says this, Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. Now, the Jews expected Elijah to return around Passover. Do you know what Jesus said about John the Baptist? Matthew 11:11, this is Jesus talking. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Verse 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if ye will receive it, this is Elias. That's Elijah. Which was for to come. He that has ears to hear, let him hear. The Jews expected Elijah at Passover to show up. John was born during Passover. And Jesus said, hey, he could have been Elijah if you guys were listening. John was born during Passover. Now, we know that Mary got pregnant, to put it in crude terms, 6 months after Elizabeth. And so she had her baby, Yeshua Messiah, Jesus Christ, 6 months later. That puts Jesus born in September, October time frame, which just happens to be the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, do you know what John said about Jesus? John 1:14. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. Look that word up in your concordance. You know what that word means? To fix one's tabernacle, to have one's tabernacle, to abide or live in a tabernacle or tent, tabernacle. It is not a coincidence that John used that word. He came to tabernacle amongst us. Tabernacles is coming up, Sukkot, Feast of Ingathering. We talk about that during our Sabbath services sometimes. It's not a coincidence. Jesus was born in September, October time frame. Now, we know, and again, I realize for some of you this is coming at you hot and heavy. You can go back and research this. That's why the verses are on the back of your program, and you can do more research. We know that Jesus was not born on the 25th of December. We know that he was born during Tabernacles. We know that the early church, that while they did celebrate Tabernacles, Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Ingathering, it has a couple different names, they did not celebrate Christ's birth, regardless of the date. They didn't celebrate. They just didn't do birthdays. So why today? And we know Americans didn't celebrate it. Americans didn't celebrate Christmas until the 1800s. It wasn't a holiday. Matter of fact, the first year that there was December 25th, Christmas, that we were a nation and we had a Congress, it was on a regular day and they just met. It wasn't any big deal. They met during December 25th. And so why do today so many believers celebrate Christmas? Why do we do that? I mean, wasn't his birthday. Nobody else did it. Why do we celebrate 25th as Jesus' birthday? One word. One person. Really. Constantine. Emperor Constantine. He's the guy who made the he made the Roman Empire become the Holy Roman Empire. And he decided that we're going to have one religion and we're going to bring everybody into this religion.